Just southeast of Cambridge sits Wandlebury Country Park, along with the mysterious Gogmagog Hills that have been shrouded in legends and tales of the supernatural for nearly 1,000 years. In English folklore, Gogmagog was the last giant to inhabit the land of Albion, an Old English name referring to the island of Great Britain. In at least 2 medieval texts, the giant is said to have been discovered by Brutus of Troy and his men, who later killed him by throwing him off a cliff.
So what then is the connection between this medieval literature and the hills here in the Cambridgeshire countryside? Well, the truth is nobody actually knows for sure. However, there's 2 theories that have been put forward that could potentially shine some light on it. The first of which is that ancient people, or people in the medieval period, believed that the hills here were in fact the grave of a giant, or possibly even Gogmagog himself. And this has been seen across the British Isles, where naturally forming hills, or even possibly old Iron Age forts, hill forts, have been mistaken, or possibly just local legend has sprung up, that they are the final resting place of giants, or even sleeping giants.
The second idea is that the hills were named after the giant hill figure that was once carved into the chalk at Wandlebury. The first mention and written proof of the hills under the name Gogmagog was in 1605, when Bishop Joseph Hall documented his visitation of a sporting event that took place at the Gogmagog Hills, which was attended by a number of students from the Cambridge universities and was known as the Gogmagog Olympics. There is also evidence that the name could have stretched as far back as 1574, when the Vice-Chancellor banned students from visiting these games.
It was in 1640 when John Layer declared,
"I could never learn how these hills came to be called Gogmagog Hills, unless it were from a portraiture of a giant which scholars of Cambridge cut upon the turf."
Now this illustrates that the hill figures were present in the 17th century, and if Mr Layer's report is to be believed, they were created by the students at the Cambridge University.
There were also a number of other accounts detailing this mysterious giant figure carved into the chalk over the 17th and 18th century.
Moving on into the 20th century, parapsychologist, dowser and archaeologist T.C. Lethbridge claimed to have rediscovered the hill figure here, and along with it 2 others, naming them the warrior, the hooded goddess and the sun god, and he proclaimed them to be in excess of 3,000 years old.
Lethbridge's claims were highly disputed by the archaeological community, with many claiming that the figures he had found were simply natural formations and it was his wild imagination that had interpreted them as figures. Whether Lethbridge rediscovered the giant hill figures or not will never be known, as they have since been covered over and parts of them destroyed, but either way it seems unlikely that they dated as far back as 3,000 years due to the reports in the 16th and 17th century. Despite these carvings' relatively recent creation, the history of Wandlebury and the Gogmagog Hills does in fact stretch into the passage of time some 2,300 years, and maybe even beyond.
There is evidence of occupation by the Iceni tribe at Wandlebury, most notably the hill fort that was constructed upon one of the hills. On top of this, there's reason to believe and archaeological evidence that there was a settlement here as well as a cemetery, so it's likely that they inhabited here for a fairly long period of time. The Romans were next to inhabit Wandlebury, and over the years people have found pottery, coins and even a ring on various archaeological digs here. Now, because they didn't adapt or modify the existing Iron Age hill fort in any way, it's very likely that this wasn't a place of permanent residence for them. However, there definitely was a number of people in the area at the time. Now, they also constructed a Roman road which runs all the way to the main Roman settlement of Colchester.
By the 17th century, a large Wandlebury estate had grown up and was primarily used for stabling horses, some of which were owned by King Charles II and King James II for racing in nearby Newmarket. In fact, the connection to horse racing at the Wandlebury estate is quite astounding, as it stabled one of the 3 stallions that all of today's thoroughbred horses are descendants of. This particular horse was called Godolphin Arabian, and although never actually raced, it did father many of the most successful horses of the time. In the years since, the estate has changed a lot, with various buildings being constructed and some being demolished. Much of the land is now open to the public as part of the Wandlebury Country Park.
Even without any prior knowledge of Wandlebury's long history with its Iron Age fort and its Roman road, and even down to the mysterious naming of the Gogmagog hills and tales of giants that have been spread throughout the years, visiting here, the site really does give you the impression of a place that's quite magical and mysterious.
It's likely that some of the early British tribes on the land carried out various rituals which ignited the area and opened it up for the potential of hauntings and the supernatural. Among its calm, peaceful trackways and thick forested areas, the ghosts of former tribespeople are said to wander between the trees, witnesses to over 2,000 years of change. The old Roman road is no doubt another site where spectres may be witnessed by unwitting visitors, with phantom Roman soldiers making their way silently along the trackway.
Wandlebury's most famous ghost can be seen on Midsummer's Night by those brave enough to attend. It's said that should you ride alone into the Wandlebury ring and announce "Night, night, come forth," a dark night rider shall emerge, and the two will do battle until a victor emerges. Now, the origins of the story have unfortunately been lost to time, however it was mentioned in the medieval period, and another tale from the medieval period relating to this comes from a man who allegedly did battle with the knight and actually won, but in doing so was pierced in the leg by a lance. Now, his wounds healed naturally, however it was said that whenever he returned to the Wandlebury ring on a dark moonlit night, his wound would reopen, blood seeping into the earth as it had done on that fateful night. Now, there's obviously no way to validate the legitimacy of this story, or even where it came from, however I just think it adds to the magic and wonder of this really, really mystical Cambridgeshire country park.